Make a pact with the Geek Legion of Doom.
Jesse Coleman directs Yellow Eyes, and now this is not a spin-off of the Supernatural series, nor it is a film about jaundice, but they do actually reference that in the movie. This is effectively a demonic possession movie, and it follows a couple who have inherited a home from a deceased family member. But this deceased family member has a secret, and there is a hidden room in this house which contains this artifact, this statue of this kind of, it turns out to be an altar basically. And this causes the husband to become demonically possessed. Primarily his eyes change to yellow. And that's the kind of the first sign, but you know, he's becoming erratic, he's kind of becoming violent and things like this. And he's looking to try and almost like infect other people with this kind of demonic influence. And it is up to the wife to try and overcome this with the help of a like theology professor and a priest and maybe her friend who's like a spiritualist. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Yellow Eyes. Now, relatively low budget movie, and it does play somewhat like a somewhat typical kind of possession movie with a couple of little differences. And I want to just talk about those little elements first, of which I kind of quite like, because ultimately there's a lot here which is very familiar. But a couple of smaller things that I kind of liked here that maybe gives it a little bit of its own flavour. Number one, I think the fact that it's the husband that's possessed rather than the female character. Because normally in these kind of possession movies, more often than not, it's like either a child or a woman. Rarely is it ever the guy that gets possessed. So to have the husband, an adult male, be the one that is being possessed, and the wife is the one that's having to kind of run around and try and help him, you know, makes it for less common territory to a degree. So there's that. Also, when we kind of get to our priest, who is somewhat more experienced in dealing with this kind of thing, he's basically like forget what you've seen in the movies, and the movie is very clearly influenced by possession movies, in particular the kind of the exorcists. That, you know, they even say, like, you know, forget saying like the power of Christ compels you. That stuff basically is not going to work, because ultimately the demon has never known God, so therefore it's not going to care necessarily about, you know, biblical words and things like this. So it gives it a sense of, well, how are they going to overcome it? What are they possibly going to be able to do? And you do feel that there's genuinely, like, this is going to be a really hard situation to try and combat, really. So, you know, even when we have our priest, who he seems, you know, very much outmatched, to be honest with you. So there's a couple of elements here that I think, you know, have somewhat kind of smaller elements that make it a little bit more sort of its own thing. The second thing I want to say is I really like the aesthetic of this movie. Now, it's low budget and it primarily takes place within this one house. But I think the aesthetic with the eyes that kind of like glow yellow, I think looks wonderful. It looks really kind of creepy and you know, obviously demonic. And the director here has done a lot with kind of like light and shadow. Oh, you could arguably say it's a little bit overdone in an actual fact, but I could have quite liked it for its artistic merits, to be honest. You know, you'll see, for example, there's a scene where she first notices his yellow eyes, and you know, it's kind of like his kind of that part of his face is lit whilst everything else is in kind of shadow and things like that. So it really kind of emphasises this kind of otherworldly look to it, and I kind of quite like the way, for example, he kind of comes in and out of shadow a lot of the time, so it kind of looks, you know, like there's something emerging from the darkness, and with these kind of piercing kind of, you know, yellow eyes. I thought it looks pretty creepy, and the movie does have this sort of almost like a sense of creepiness, but also a sense of debauchery, because this kind of this demonic sort of influence seems to make anyone who's kind of comes into contact with it sort of very sort of like erratic and sort of perverse to it in a way. So you do feel this is having a very deep and kind of like traumatic effect on anyone who's kind of come into contact with it. So it looks cool. I think some of the kind of the way this movie has this sort of somewhat of a nihilistic approach to like this hopelessness of the situation gives it a real sense of of stakes, because you feel like there's isn't going to be some easy kind of like fix to kind of try and get out of this mess, basically. So you do feel a genuine kind of sense of danger. I think the acting performances are really good. I really actually thought our couple, before really any sort of demonic possession, you genuinely feel like they're like a loving couple. I thought the two actors here did a great job of selling you in the fact that this is a genuine couple who genuinely are sort of in love with each other and are happy. And when the guy starts to get kind of possessed, it's not like straight away. It's sort of, it's in and out. So it's still there, that kind of that love is still there, but then he kind of ends up becoming like more sort of strange behaviour and stuff. So, props to, again, the actors who I thought do a decent enough job. So let's talk about what doesn't work. Unfortunately, this movie is one of these films that sort of leans into some of the kind of the typical kind of movie cliches, horror movie cliches. So there's a scene where our wife's kind of walking around this dark house and she's using a flashlight, or a torch as we call it here in the UK. Like, why not turn on the lights? She does it again at the end and the lights don't work. I'm not talking about that scene. But sort of midway through the movie, she's kind of walking around trying to find her husband, but she's using like, a handheld portable light, but she's not turning on the main light. Like, why not? Well, I'll tell you why not. It's so we can have a scene in darkness and making it look creepy. But it doesn't really make sense in a realistic sort of what would actual kind of people do. And there's a few like little elements like that I just feel don't really kind of make sense. There's we see that this this demonic entity is primarily possessing the husband, but it also takes an effect on other people, like friends and stuff that kind of come around. But the husband is the sort of the primary recipient of this demonic presence. And I didn't really get why he's not trying to turn his wife, because he tried to turn other people, and he has his wife, to himself in the house a lot of the time. So why isn't he trying to turn his wife, which ultimately they try and do towards the end, but why not try and do it earlier on? I mean, arguably you could say that, it's just the love of the husband trying to kind of like stop that. But I didn't really sort of feel like that was put through on the movie, because for long periods this demonic entity seems to be the one in the driving seat. So why is it not trying to like influence the wife like earlier on until like right towards the end of the movie, when ultimately it's going for the kind of the end game here? Again, it's trying to, so we can have the movie's plot happen ultimately, but other people, it's trying to kind of turn them straight away. So things like this. There's a scene where a character gets stabbed through the bottom of the jaw, and it kind of something comes out of his mouth, and it looks like he's dead. And it's like, well, that wouldn't kill. That wouldn't even make you unconscious, really. That was, you would bleed and stuff, but it's not going to be just through there and out the mouth. That's not going to be any type of genuine damage. It's not going in the brain or the spine or anything like that. And it's just like, well, that doesn't make sense, So there's a few elements like this that you just feel like, well, it's kind of like, hand-wavy movie logic that, we say because we either want it to look spooky or we want the plot to go in a certain direction, but again, it kind of portrays a sense of realism and sort of believability to a certain degree. I mean, there's no, I guess you would say there's lots of films that do that, so, this is not unique to this film, but again, we're only talking about this film in this review. I think once we get to the halfway point, I still enjoyed this movie a lot, but I feel it's sort of pretty much turned into a run-of-the-mill possession film. where it kind of goes through the paces. You know, just kind of like, oh, you know, we're going to get the priest, and there's going to be, you know, that's going to be the final thing, and everything like that. And then the other thing I would say is that, again, this maybe goes back to what I was saying about some decisions here. Like, the wife clearly sees that her husband's eyes are yellow, but she never really addresses it. I mean, you see her at some points kind of like Googling demonic possession and stuff, but she's never like, what the hell's happened to your eyes? You know, like calling a doctor or anything like that. She just kind of like sees it, is a bit sort of freaked out by it, but doesn't really sort of question why her husband's eyes are like bright yellow. And just kind of like more or less kind of goes about her day to a large degree. You know, in secret she's kind of like, maybe I should be a bit worried about this. But thinking, come on, you would at least, because your initial thought probably isn't going to be demonic possession when you think, what the hell's happened to your eyes? And it's like, this isn't like, oh, your eyes are tired. It's like proper like piercing kind of yellow eyes. It's like, again, it's that sort of, we want the movie to go in a certain way. So look, the movie ends up being a little flawed in its script. And a little bit sort of ultimately similar to what you've seen before, although it does try to have a couple of unique elements. But overall, it's still an above average possession movie. I kind of quite liked it. It's visually interesting without being over the top, and the performances I think are very strong. And you know, if you want kind of more of the same but you enjoy possession movies, I would check it out. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.